welcome to this edition of Getting to Know You, a series of interviews with members of the Essex Association of Change Ringers to find out a little bit about their ringing careers, but also a little bit about what else they do outside of ringing. Today I'm speaking to Roger Collins. Hello, Roger.
Good morning, Vicky.
Roger, you're the Safeguarding Officer for the Essex Association of Change Ringers. Can you tell us a little bit about that role? What does it mean? What does it entail? And why is it important?
Right, yes, I've been Safeguarding Officer for several years now, and over the years I've seen safeguarding grow to where we are now. We've got one policy, the House of Bishops policy, to cover all safeguarding requirements. So I see my role as a liaison, really, between the association and the towers and everybody in the association. And of course, we're looking at the local office in Chelmsford, who handle local safeguarding. I also see my role as is coordinating all of the other people involved in safeguarding. And we're looking at the Chelmsford office. We're looking at companies called 318 now, which is the Church of England, Child Protections. And we've also got the parishes, the towers, and all of the association officers, and sort of keeping all of that together. Central Council as well, particularly Chris Mew's done a lot of hard work in safeguarding. And what I'm finding now is that the number of inquiries I get from people is very, very much lower.
And why do you think safeguarding is important in a bell ringing context?
I think, to be honest, it's very important in any context in life, really. People need to be reassured that safeguarding is there for the safety of their children if they let them, if they're bell ringing, for example, or carrying out any activity, to be perfectly honest.
What would you say were the sort of principles that people need to know generally within their sort of local towers?
In local towers, they need to know who to contact. They need to know who's the person to speak to in the tower, for example. The tower captain is usually the one. And if they've got any queries, who to go to. And also as well, general sort of child protection on notice boards, for example, is important as well, so they can see that the tower is up to speed and that there is a process there and working should it ever be required.
If a young person came up the tower and wanted to learn to ring, what systems, what precautions would you need to have in place?
The tutor must be there, but not on his own. You need a minimum of 2 people there when you're teaching someone to ring.
So would someone, as a tower captain or a teacher, need to be DBS cleared?
Yes, the tower captain will need to be DBS cleared, and of course that will all be done through his local office. So that's an absolute minimum. Also, as well, the tower captain will have to have the training as well, the online training, to give all the fundamentals of child protection in the teaching role.
So how would they access that online training?
That will be done via their parish office, and then they'll be given a link to go on and complete that online. There's a first basic one, which is really available to anybody. And then there's the second line, which is for tower captains and people in primary roles regarding teaching. Again, it's online, but it is what they call the C2. And, it is just that high level, which the tower captain will require.
Where do you consider your home tower, if indeed you have one?
Well, my home tower is Saffron Walden in northwest Essex. But I also regard all the towers round us as really sort of part of the home team as well, because we do sort of bring together and help each other out for weddings, etc.
How old were you, and when and where did you learn to ring?
I was 12 years old when I first started to ring, and it really happened out of the blue, because at the time I was involved in the church. I was a chorister at St Mary's in Saffron Walden. And reasonably happy with that in itself, but I wasn't really all that keen on the choir master. Anyway, so it just so happened not long after that that one of my pals at school, who I happened to play trumpet with in the school orchestra, he was a bell ringer, but he wanted to give up. But he'd been asked by the tower captain if he could find someone else to take his place, and he asked me. Didn't know anything about it, but being young and sort of keen to have a go at anything, I thought, okay, yeah, I'll come along on a Tuesday night. So it happened, and this was November 1965.
And what are your early recollections of learning to ring?
Well, very, very positive, Vicky. Very positive. I mean, the tutor I had was excellent. The late Barry Cousins. They were at the time actually having quite a focus on training. There were two tutors at the time, say Barry Cousins and a lady called Jean Sanderson. You may well have heard of her in the past. Yeah. So anyway, Barry was my tutor, and well, I took to it straight away, Vicky. And it was just one of those things, when you try something, you think, yes, this is for me.
What do you enjoy about ringing that keeps you going?
Well, it's the challenge of the ringing itself is one. It's the camaraderie as well, and the fact that you need a good team round you to make it all work. And of course, the social aspect afterwards as well. I mean, we all enjoy that. And yeah, overall, it's got everything that I think you need for a really good sort of pastime.
What would you say your greatest either ringing memories or achievements?
That's a difficult one, really. I mean, one I particularly remember, it's a success yet a failure, strangely enough. It was in 1974. It was the year I'd started doing a bit more ringing after my apprenticeship had finished the year before. And I was ringing regularly, not only at Saffron Walden, but also with the Duxford Band as well. And in the August of 74, they had this sort of rather crazy idea, I thought at the time, to ring 12 quarter peals in a day. Yeah. Anyway, yes, it was. I mean, it was quite a thing. The record apparently was 11, so we went for it, and we equalled the record, but we lost the very last one. I think we were ringing at Harston near Cambridge at the time, and the look on people's faces when we lost it, we just knew, looking at everyone, no one had got anything left in the battery. The battery was finished. And we just didn't, we didn't start again. But it was a success. We equalled the record, but never quite achieved the ultimate goal.
So would you class that as a story of perhaps where it didn't go quite so well, or have you got another example where something didn't quite go according to plan?
I think a success from my point of view is that conducting peals I have never found easy. I seem to have to sort of spend about a month looking at the composition and learning everything so that it's all there. So, and I did actually call a peal of Grantzer about 20 years ago. I found it extremely difficult, but we got it in the end, and so I found that was a real success for me.
Have there been any influential ringers for you across the years, and why would they be influential?
My first tutor, Barry Cousins, obviously he made a real impression on me when I first started. So, and he was an excellent teacher, and so that's one ringer who's really up there with the top. And moving on from that, do you remember dear old George Eve when he was secretary of the association? He was a wonderful man. He had limited ability in ringing, but his ability to organise and his wonderful manner, and he was a real gentleman and a man of real integrity as well. And I really held him in high esteem in the years I sort of worked with him when he was secretary. Alan Barber is another one, very sort of quiet and unassuming man, but an absolute giant in ringing as far as calling and conducting, So, yeah. And our Mary Bone, for example, look what Mary's achieved. Absolutely wonderful. You know, there she is now, Secretary of the Central Council. Yet she's very, very quiet and unassuming, unless she's calling, of course, a court appeal or something.
So you've been ringing for a number of years. You've rung appeals, you've rung 11 court appeals in a day. Are there any bell ringing goals or ambitions that you still want to achieve?
Unfortunately, that one sort of really fizzled out a bit when I retired, funnily enough, because I retired at 60, which we did in BT. And I'd planned to once I'd retired, to join a lot of these court appeal bands and local midweek groups. But unfortunately, after 6 months, I picked up an arm injury, which has really sort of curtailed all my ringing, which is, well, a lot of it anyway, which is a great shame. You know, you've got golden oldies and all these sort of people that meet midweek, so that was the plan, appeals and court appeals. But sadly, it didn't happen to Vicky, which is a shame, great shame. So my goal really is to keep ringing as long as I possibly can. But I've had to stop appeal ringing, and I need to do a few court appeals now and again. But I'm still there, still hanging on.
What would you say to other ringers to enthuse them, to encourage them, or to get them to participate?
The thing I would say to ringers a lot of the time is enjoy what you're doing and do it to the best of your ability. Always ask of other ringers as well, what they suggest. But also as well, remember that there's other things outside ringing as well. I think there's some things that some ringers sort of feel that's all there is in the world. But it's a balanced view really, Vicky. It's balancing everything. Adult ringers in particular, I've found, really do need an awful lot of assistance and sort of nurturing to get them to move forward, because they do find it incredibly difficult. I mean, we've seen a lot of them in recent times. Youngsters, I mean, they're so open-minded, they just blast straight in, and they find it so easy, and it's wonderful to see. Just don't be discouraged. It will take longer, but you can do it.
So what would you say to non-ringers about bell ringing, to try and encourage them into the tower?
Well, really, I mean, come along and have a look, and just ask questions, and come to the pub afterwards, and we'll have have a chat of it over a beer. Some just click straight onto it. Others, they come and they go. That's all we can do, I think, is encourage them. But again, it's important, if they do have a go, is to put them in the hands of a really competent tutor as well.
What unexpected things has ringing taught you over the years?
To respect everybody, really, absolutely. You can achieve an awful lot more than you think you can. That's right. It's just all the sort of the key things of life. You've got to be motivated to do things. You really have. Just constantly encourage.
You are currently a safeguarding officer, as we've already explored. You've been a district officer in the past as well, and you've done the ringing at a number of towers. Yeah. What made you become involved in the management of the Essex Association?
I suppose really it was, I remember it well, yes, it was in the mid-1970s. I just went to a district meeting, and when it came to the deputy master for the Northwest, no one put their hand up, and someone looked in my direction and said, "Would you be prepared to give it a go?" And I said, "Yes, of course I would." And it went from there, Vicky. And I guess that probably happens to the majority of people who get involved in the association.
What do you get out of being involved in the management of the association?
It's really the satisfaction of giving something back that's going to help not only the association but all the people in it, because there is an awful lot we can do. And I've always felt that my key sort of skill in ringing has really been teaching, handling. I'm not an expert at method ringing, I must confess, but you know, I still enjoy it. But it's handling and making sure that good handling is there, and it's absolutely essential. You know, if people are going to move on and make a success of it.
You said you're retired now.
Yeah.
What else do you do outside of ringing then?
And I've been looking after my wife and my elderly mother because they're both vulnerable people. So I really haven't had too much time to think about that. In a way, I do an awful lot of DIY around the house. I've got an old Victorian house, as you've probably seen on the on the film. But so yeah, that needs constant sort of attention. Help the wife in the garden. She does it mainly, but I do help. I do as I'm told in the garden. I've also had a lifelong interest in aviation as well. Goes back really to childhood. Used to make sort of model aircraft and fly them as well. And so that's been a great source of enjoyment and pleasure. And I also fly light aircraft as well from time to time, but not at the moment. So I look forward to getting back up in the air again. The thing is, Vicky, it's part of my life. I've done it for what, 40 years. So yeah, and really, if you think about it, Essex is a lovely county, not only from the sort of all the wonderful churches and towers and people, but it's fantastic from the air as well. You go out towards, you know, the coastline there, near sort of West Mersey and all around Malden Way, Malden on the Mud. You can see from the air why it gets that name. You know, the huge mud flats there. But it's fantastic from the air, around Clacton as well.
How would you juggle your ringing activities with all the other commitments that you have in daily life?
Well, to be honest, nowadays it's not really a problem, Vicky. You know, because I've obviously been in retirement now for a few years. Looking back to when I was working full time, I sometimes wonder how I did it all, to be perfectly honest. But you just do, don't you? You know, what it's difficult to sort of put into words. But if I look back now, certainly, yes, I think, well, how on earth did we do that? I mean, I was ringing peals most weekends, quarter peals at Saffron Walden, all sorts of things, and of course district meetings and everything else, as well as the sort of I know the association meetings only happen a couple of times a year, but yeah, we do, don't we? We find ways of doing it.
Roger, thank you very much for sharing with us your ringing career and a little bit more insight into who Roger Collin is. Just to finish up with, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any interesting stories or pearls of wisdom that you'd want to share?
I think we just need to keep open-minded and positive all the time, you know, with everything that we do. You know, I'm really sort of thinking back to sort of particularly recruiting as well, because, you know, as I said earlier on, the adults find it so difficult to do. But that's what I try to promote. Be positive and, you know, move yourself forward and don't you know, always ask questions. And help's always at hand in ringing, isn't it?
Thank you very much for joining me today. It's been really interesting to find out a little bit more about you and your ringing and your flying and everything else that you do. Thank you for taking part in getting to know.
Well, thank you, Vicky.